Most men don't play, they perform, they provide, they survive. And after a divorce or any major collapse, play usually disappears. But what if joy isn't the reward after you heal, but it's part of how you heal? Today I'm talking with Anthony. He's a playfulness catalyst. He's a former pro juggler, yogi, street performer, permaculture practitioner, and he now helps people reconnect with the parts of themselves they left behind on the way to becoming adults. Anthony creates spaces where people rediscover joy, permission, and the weird beauty of being fully alive. This conversation's about waking up, not through a crisis, but through curiosity. Anthony, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Jeff.
I think this interview is coming at the exact right time for me. Last night, I was working on my business, and I just had a moment, and it felt unrelenting and heavy and frustrating, and it was like there's no end to this work in sight. So I told my wife that, and we were sitting on the couch, and she said, "All right, let's get up." She said, "Grab the speaker," and then we put on some music and had a little dance party, and we started with Tiny Dancer, and we were singing at the top of our lungs, and it was a lovely moment. And I imagine this is a fairly common feeling among high performers. Is that what your work is pushing back against?
It's pushing against this feeling of the daunting, endless drudgery of work. Is that what you're asking, Jeff?
Yeah, that feeling of heaviness.
Yeah, yes. Play, it's such an incredible thing, really. It's on one side, it's a manifestation of when we feel great about our lives. On the other hand, it's an activity or it's a mindset that when we engage in, we bring back that reset of our nervous system and start to feel good about ourselves again. So like you were saying yesterday, your wife pulled you to one side and basically saved you in that moment. We don't want to let go of this bone. We're like, and when we use play breaks, that's just one way that play can be helpful to us. We let go of the bone a little moment, and create some space in our minds so that we can have new thoughts. We have a big different perspective of what we're looking at. So play is more about the process than the end result. And that's the big difference between, it's a brilliant antidote to perfectionism, where we're a lot more focused on a result that we've beforehand decided what we wanted, right? And through so far into that point and look back and go, wow, what a journey that's been so far, and realize how much we have to share and and put a little bit more joy in the process, because being human beings, it's tough, but it doesn't have to be as tough as we make it out. That's what I'm trying to say.
You've said that your path to play began when you realized the seriousness around you wasn't actually you. Can you take us back to that moment and what cracked for you?
Yeah, so I just felt this heaviness around me that I couldn't really put a finger on. I wouldn't have described it as depression. It might have been a bit of depression. It might have been a bit just like not feeling quite like on path, a little bit lost maybe. But I could feel this like weight over me, and I stopped for a second in my tracks. I was sitting down and I wasn't moving anyway, but I stopped, I stopped my mental process, and I looked at it and said, hang on a second, this thing here, this is all these thoughts around me that you have to be active, you have to be working, you have to be earning, you have to be this, you have to be that, you have to be this. There's no time for play, even though I've worked as a juggler a long time, and I've done lots of playful activities. There are moments where there's this seriousness, and I saw it really as a result of my environment. Wouldn't say my wife, but generally speaking, as a society level, this is what I saw. And so then I realized that to regain my playfulness, I would have to bring it out there and find people that are interested in play as well, or sort of like activate other people into their playfulness to get more of this positive feedback loop going on, let's say. So it took, what that realization took was this weight that there's something wrong with me, that I feel like this. And it was like, it wasn't pointing a finger at society, but it was saying this question is bigger than just me. And that stayed with me, this thought of wanting to activate and engage and we'll talk, hopefully we'll get into this a little bit more about what play is, right? And how it's different for different people. But
I feel like play opens this door to The idea that we're on these rails and society has this obsession with appearing functional, and it almost feels like this madness where we're expected to do things. I had a call with a government official, and I was told I had an obligation, and I don't remember signing up for that obligation. And those moments, it's like this call to wake up. Like, how did I get here? How did we get here as a society? It feels like madness.
Yeah, no, it is, because it doesn't just have an expectation of what it wants from you, like as a result. It has an expectation of how you're supposed to get there as well. Yeah, and it's just, there's a lot more to this whole, but prior to the Industrial Revolution, as a society in the West anyway, we played a lot more. There was a lot more leisure time. Since the moment that time became associated with money, that's when we lost our playfulness, essentially. Because play is, in its definition, something that doesn't have a goal to it. It's something you do for the pure pleasure of it. So in the productivity factory mind, it's as if, yeah, time, you can't waste time. It's like there's no time to be wasted by playful. But what we see now, that we're actually, when we're in that mindset and we're bantering with people and we're really in this creative flow, our best ideas come out. Now, it doesn't come out by doing your thing and sticking narrowly there. It's play helps us to bring out better ideas in a workspace, let's say. So it's a completely Victorian idea that needs to be dismantled. That's how I see it.
It's almost like it's the idea that creativity lives in those moments of where you're vulnerable, and play feels vulnerable. Like your guard is down and you're allowing something deeper to come out.
Yeah, you have to be vulnerable. You can choose absolutely how vulnerable, but let's just take a simple example that I say, Jeff, let's go out and toss a Frisbee around, right? There's no vulnerability about it. The only vulnerability, perhaps, is the fact that you're seen as a grown man playing with a Frisbee. And actually, if you think of all the people that might see you in a park as an adult playing Frisbee with another adult, and they also get these thoughts, hey, I want to do that as well. We sort of like, it's the idea of co-liberation, that doing something like that, and not doing it in a weird way. We're not being weird. We're not forcing our play down anybody's throats. We're just playing a Frisbee, And when we're guided at it as an activity as pure joy, we don't even interested in keeping score or points or anything. It's really this just primitive communication, just throwing backwards and forwards a Frisbee. Perhaps we're throwing it a little bit further out. We're challenging each other a little bit, but it's one of the simplest exercises to come back to, or playful activities for throwing a Frisbee. And there's lots more of them, but just wanted to share that was an example of how we don't have to be vulnerable. Let's say dancing, on the other extreme, we might be a bit more self-conscious about it. So we might be a bit more vulnerable. But when we're throwing a Frisbee, we do all sorts of crazy things with our bodies that we're not even really aware of. We are really moving in a more spontaneous way. But yeah, for sure, it's we have to drop this idea that I know everything, I've got everything under control. Definitely, we have to drop that anyway. We have to admit to ourselves that we haven't got everything under control. We're moving in the right direction, we're doing our best, but we can't say we've got everything under control. We're not letting things slip by, right? With one ball. There's a difference here. We're going in the right direction. That feeling is that, I think that's, for me, the only thing that we can really hold on to, is that I'm going in the right direction.
So I think you opened the door to it. How do you define play then?
Yeah, so I start with trying to define playfulness before I start defining play, because play is a little bit more tricky to define, and it's a little bit more subjective than playfulness. Playfulness is basically an attitude of curiosity, openness, and joy. So it starts with curiosity. I'm curious things. I don't know how things are already. I'm not pretending to be a know-it-all. I'm open to the experience, and also I'm excited about the experience. I'm not dissing it before I start. I'm playful. Like a tiny bit of skepticism is good, right? But too much will keep us out of playfulness. It puts a barrier between us. It protects our vulnerability in the end. And playfulness, it's more of this approach than what it actually is. But how it shows up in a greater connection with other people, greater vitality. I define the playful path, as I say it, as being where these three things come together, which is a vibrant body, a loving heart, and a joyful mind. And someone might say, well, I haven't got any of these right now, but walking along the playful path, starting somewhere, activates all the other ones. Um, and play, on the other hand, it's been defined by lots of people. Great, there's lots of interesting books written on play and playfulness and the play philosophy, let's say. And there's one called The Grasshopper by Bernard Suits. It's a bit of slightly heavy reading, but they go on to talk about what is a game, what is not a game. They talk a lot more about games, but we play games. So that's and there are actually lots of people that study philosophy that go into what is play, and it's almost certain that Plato didn't actually say this, but I like it as it's almost like I like the concept that it brings. It's like that you can learn more from an hour of play with somebody than a lifetime of conversation. And what he meant there is really like knowing what the substance of somebody is. If they're trustworthy or if they're like holding back, or how is their strategies. It's like, are they open? So it's you get to know somebody through games and through play. But yeah, it's my take is that basically everything just comes a bit more alive and is a bit more enjoyable, and there's this element of play in there, and it's often very spontaneous. And Alan Watts talks about it in Here's a talk on it's on YouTube. It's play as work. Work as play. Sorry, work as play. Play as work. And in this incredible talk that he goes into, he talks at a certain point about bus drivers. That they are playing at a certain point as a bus driver. They're not like, there is an element of taking people around, going around the town, being on their bus, almost like a video game, sort of like. Otherwise, it'd just be a horrible drudgery. And I also think of like there are lots of mechanics, working in car repair shops, and they're often the funniest people. They share banter between each other. So where I was a pro juggler, all of a sudden I started to realize that this playfulness hasn't got anything to do with the work you do actually in the end, because apparently playful job like a juggler can be taken very seriously without joy in the end. Whereas something you wouldn't think of as being playful, perhaps, a chef, I don't know, they're very high stress positions, chefs, right? But chefs, they can be playful in their way. Let's think of another random job. Yeah. But anyway, there's ways they use this term gamify, right? But I think it can be a bit more human than just gamifying things.
It's an energy you bring to the work, right?
Yeah, it's a care. Play is very related to care. When we awaken our playfulness, we also awaken up our courage, our joyfulness, our sense of gratitude, and kindness. We start to become much kinder, because what happens when we play is what happens between us is much more important than me or you. It's what we create together. And to go back to working as a computer job, there's lots of different ways. There's also some people would perhaps time themselves to do something in a quicker time, or I don't know, rushing things isn't generally a good idea, right? But sometimes it can be the stimulus to break you out of, like, if you're going really slow and drudgery, right? Or it could be, oftentimes the element of play comes when it's shared with somebody else. So there's a sort of relationship going on, or it could be sharing different ways to come up with new ideas. Or if we're just plugging away, then the joy is having finished it at the end, right? Rather than the process.
You've said that it's not about being a joker, but it's about rediscovering your part of yourself that gets buried. What's the first clue that someone's cut off from that part?
Okay, so there's a lot to open up here. Let me try and keep my mind focused on this. So the first thing, when you're cut off from your playfulness, basically you don't see it around you. Like, everything seems terribly serious. Everything seems very heavy. Just full of things you have to do. You're not getting to the bottom of it. When it starts to wake up a little bit, our playfulness starts to wake up a little bit more, then we start to see more of it around us that was always there, but we just didn't see it. So I always suggest the first step is to, when we're walking, let's say we're walking out and about, is to slow down a little bit more. Just slow down and observe and interact a little bit with things. But like, that doesn't mean you have to do something, but feel part of it. So if there are trees, you see some leaves moving or the branches, you feel part of it. You see dogs running about, you feel part of that experience. You can sort of imagine what it might be like as a dog running around. Or perhaps you take a different route to work, you don't do the same way every day, and then you're waking this up. So when it's absent, play in our lives, it feels a very hostile place. And I like to think of it like this. It's this picture sort of sums it up very well. We can imagine like a small castle in the middle of nowhere, and it starts to get attacked, and someone sees it, and within seconds the whole of the population in this castle are on alert. And then they manage to, or the enemy has enough and he just goes away, or I don't know, they pour boiling water all over them and they all die. I don't know, but anyway, the conflict becomes over, and then there comes laughter. So everyone in the castle then all laughs and then releases this intensity of the urgency around it. But in our culture, we just have a message all the time of danger, of essentially of danger, and this just keeps us in this mode that we don't actually ever release this sense. So we don't have a release, so we don't actually even ever relax and come back to ourselves, which would be the normal response. Animals also, if they have a fight or something, they will take a time to be on their own, lick their wounds or shake, or they will release this. We don't get this in our society, so it's normal that we feel awful at the end of the day, right? So yeah, we could laugh at ourselves. Sometimes I think it can be good to pretend to have a tantrum, just have a little tantrum every now and again on your own, stamp on the floor, fists, and go, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to, nobody's going to see you, but you have to be a little bit vulnerable, like you said, to do this. But you will have a good laugh at yourself after that, and you say like, okay, and in a split second you will reconfigure the whole, you just feel in a different space after all of that, and you can have a tantrum about anything. I think it's really funny to have a playful tantrum every now and again. I had something else I wanted to say about the Joker, but I don't know if you wanted to chime in on what I've been saying here.
Well, I can, go ahead.
Okay, so we mentioned the Joker. There are considered 8, or I prefer 9 play personalities. And the first one is Joker. So some people are the class clown. They are full of jokes. They're boiling over with energy a lot of the time. But there's other 8 of them, right? So I'm not going to list them all because you can find them everywhere. I can list them off if you're interested in it. So we have mover. So some of us, our playful modality is to move. So I, for example, find it very hard to sit still at a table and thinking. Every now and again, I need to get up and move about. I need to move to think. People that need to move to think. And then we have the explorer type, who's very interested in exploring, learning new things about yourself, learning new things about the world, even planning a holiday, taking time to study the maps. That is play, essentially. It's care. But when we go back to how we played as a child, one of these will perhaps be more predominant. 1 or 2 or 3 of these will be perhaps more predominant. And if they're missing in our lives now, then we can be pretty certain that we feel this thing is missing in our life. It doesn't have to be exactly the same as that. Will be a mature, translated version of how we played as a child. But this is essentially the work that I take people through, is to go back to find out what that was and see if it's aligned with what we're doing now, if there's some tweaks we can do. As the very first steps to regaining our sense of playfulness in our lives.
I can see myself in a bit of all of those 9 that you listed out. Why does it matter which one that I am, or that I identify which one that I am, or the mixture?
If there's one that really stands out, then it matters because that is probably connected to like really who you are. If you're a little bit of like all of them, then you've got more choice. But if there's one that you like, if you look at it very honestly and say like, this part is missing in my life now, this thing, I don't know, collecting, is there anything I'm collecting right now? Or, it's, I think as we wake up more into our playfulness, we develop all of these. And actually the ones that we aren't part of us, they give us a lot of joy and nourishment from diving into them. So for me, for example, the competitor is really not part of who I am, and I tend to shy away from competition. But it's something that if I put a little bit more energy into that, then a bit more of my yang will come out, you know? So rather than being a bit more yin, which quite a lot of men, we are now like a bit more yin, right? And probably people that are listening to this now, they probably identify with it being a little bit more on the passive rather than the active, aggressive side of things. Competition could be seen as it being more aggressive in a way. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be at all, right?
Let's talk about rules for a second here. And you talk about play-free rules. Maybe you can define those briefly for us. But they're, what I understand, they're beliefs that we carry that steal our joy. So what are some of the rules that men don't even realize they've absorbed?
Yeah, yeah. So I can't make any mistakes. That's probably a really big one. That I can't take any risks. You know, I can't take risks because there lots of people depend on me. Other things, even simple as like plays for children. I'm an adult now. I have to behave like an adult and define what that means, of course, right? Define it. It's like there are also rules. I have rules about how an adult is defined. And is that true? You know, is that really true that an adult is like this? Is an adult somebody who appears, or is an adult someone who actually cares? You know, we have energy, we have knowledge, we're not old and we're not young. We have responsibility when we're like in our mid-age because we're at a point where we can really be of help to other people, right? And other rules, yeah, I'm not good at doing this or I'm not good at doing that. They're connected a lot with our identity. You know, I'm not playful could be a rule that I have that limits it. So just for starters, right? These some for starters, yeah.
What's a rule you had to break in order to get back to yourself?
Oh, that's a really good one. I have to think about that a second. Well, last year I went on a trip for 40 days, a solo trip without my wife, and I probably had some sort of rules like I can't leave her on our own and just take off for 40 days. That was quite a big thing to do, right? That's the first thing that comes to mind now, this fact of taking off. And I think lots of men in their marriages that are struggling would do very good to just take off for a while. Perhaps even their wife agrees with them, you know? They say like, man, you're an asshole now, you're grumpy. I think it's a really good idea that you go off and find yourself. Like, no worries. It can be an honest conversation that you have with somebody. So it's like, and there are always many ways of satisfying needs and talking about it and be proactive, not just swimming in our worries, but being proactive about how to meet those needs. We don't even know what our needs are as men most of the time. We don't know. Because we don't ask ourselves those questions, right? I see it's a very hard time. It's a hard time to be a man, hard time to be a person, right? We're talking more to men here, right? But play is a big help because it connects us to other people. We don't feel quite so alone with our struggles. And it doesn't mean we have to share and complain. That's not it. But to share how I'm feeling, say, hey, can you listen to me a second? I've got something I really need to get off my chest and I just need some clarity around it. You know, that's wonderful and creates a connection with somebody, whether it's a friend or partner.
A lot of men don't take play seriously, like you were saying just a second ago. Men would rather double down and squeeze tighter than try something that might make them feel silly. How do you help them across that threshold?
Well, I don't know if I can. I'm like always joking, but it's somebody has to realize, for me to be able to work with someone, they have to realize that they're grinding it a bit too much and like their health and their relationships are suffering perhaps a little bit because of it, trying to find a different way out of it. Work, I really like Tony Robbins' model of 6 human needs and just seeing like where like work basically meets all of our needs. It can meet all of them. Certainty, uncertainty, connection, sense of significance, growth. It's got all of them in. It's like got all of them in there. So it's highly addictive, our work. But if we just double down, we're going to burn out and not be good for anybody. So I think it's about sharing the consequences of that, of what happens when we do that. And our computers and our task lists, they're all very addictive, you know, they make us feel very important to go through them. They're calling us to be done, to leave things. It's very hard. The other day I even left my phone at home and I went out all afternoon and it was like, felt very strange to leave my phone at home. But hey, I mean, how do we get to this point where we have to have this phone with us all the time? For me, it's keeps me a bit too wired and makes me irritable and not so good to be around, such good company. We talk about ADHD, but we're distracted with all this input all over the place, right? Play is essentially integration as well. I just want to share a little story with you because it's on my website. There's like a starter kit that people can download about more playful living, and there's a whole load of interviews on there. And there's one interview with this guy. He's like, it's very open, these lessons. He's like, oh, what should we do today? And the kids are like, oh, let's be airplanes. So they're being airplanes. And they're like, oh, let's crash into buildings. And and then we all die. And so as a facilitator, as a teacher, you could say, no, you can't. No, you can't talk about these things. And you can see this adult sense of like, no, you can't talk. But this is the way that children integrate these experiences and they elaborate them and release them. And it's very interesting to be able to allow this to happen. So to play with our experiences and act them out helps us to release it somehow through our system. So we could even act out and play out like our divorce, Why not? You could even get a wig and play the other person's part and just play around this thing, or even just write a funny story about how it was, just to get some distance from it. And somehow some sense of resolution, I guess. I wonder if that's the right word.
You never get resolution from a divorce. It's an ongoing thing. It grinds for the rest of your life. You never get to say that one thing you always wanted to say.
It wasn't resolution then, I meant.
It's some sense of completion, maybe.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So let's get back to playing, though. What's the cost of cutting play out of your life?
Well, it's cutting life out of your life, essentially. It's as simple as that. So as a kids yoga teacher that I did for a long time, what I see is that children, the role models that children have, children learn through play. And if they see their parents as stimulus to how to move, it's very impoverished. They see adults walking, sitting down. They might see them do some sports if they've got a sporty family and they're already much more advantaged, or perhaps they have artist family or dancers. But most of the time, most parents, they're very, very boring. And children, they play all the time, but they need this stimulus. They need parents to go down on the floor and play with them. So if play is out of our lives and we don't value it, then we won't with our families. We won't play with our families either. So we're missing out on that connection. We will isolate ourselves. And it's not something we just wake up to all at a certain time. It's something that needs to be continuous. Or it could be special moments. It doesn't have to be like every moment of the day, right? I don't want to say that. And so when it's out of our lives, it's like, what's the point? Why is it really work? Is that the whole thing? I remember you said a while ago, about feeling like an ATM machine. That's a horrible feeling, And that's feeling whether you're divorced or whether you're in a relationship. The play, it's not something we do for other people. We do it for other people. We do it for ourselves. It's really a big piece of our life that comes back to us. So I don't know if I'm getting it across. I think so. Let's have a little thought experiment a second. It's like, just imagine. This is an experiment that a friend he was doing with council halls, with city halls. He would go in there and he'd say, let's design a city without play in it. So they would design recreation areas. There would be no places where people would hang out. There would be this and the other thing. And then at the end he would say, well, this is what we've designed. And the penny would drop then, that we've actually created all these spaces with no play in it at all. And so we can design our lives with more play in it. People say, I've heard stories where making a routine of getting the kids out of the house in the morning, making it more playful, just makes it more enjoyable. It doesn't have to be this fight to get everybody out in the right time, It's there's also this thought that it's like, if your kid is late for school, after a few days, a week or something, they won't want to be late anymore. It's like, it can be their responsibility. It doesn't have to be ours to be always this disciplinarian, right? It's a lot of stuff. I feel we're talking a lot of stuff, Jeff.
We are. When I was in the thick of it, I didn't know what joy looked like. And it goes back to your ATM comment. It felt like my ex was assigning the role of an ATM to me, to give context. Society was giving me the role of an ATM because I had a court order saying you have to pay this much money. That became the role designated to me. And that's a dark place to go because you've taken away your humanity from that. So if a man has just come out of that, or if he's just sort of reeling, what's the first step to get out of that?
Yeah, there's could be lots of approaches, and I think different approaches work for different people. Personally, the first thing to do would just be write about the whole thing. It's like take an afternoon or a whole day, or I don't know, just write about it. Just get it all out of you. Like what's gone through there, how do you feel, and or anything that passes through your mind, just write it, get it all out, just get it all out. And then once we get it all out, then we can be a bit quiet all of a sudden. We can find some quiet time. But yeah, coming back to our bodies, walking quickly, at least half an hour a day of just walking, leaving your phone at home, I don't know, just doing things for yourself that are nurturing, that are going to put you into a virtuous cycle rather than the vicious cycle. So we tend to do things to feel better, but we just have to sort of trust that just small things will draw us out of that in the end. And we're in this moment and just realize that it's tough, but there's gold there somewhere, even though it might not seem like there is right in that moment. So yeah, it's and there's this whole thing of taking off and traveling, you know. If you've got things that you really need to sort out, unfinished business, then that's the time to get on with it and do it all. Sort out your unfinished business. And then I think it's good just to leave and go somewhere else and take the time to lick your wounds and think what would be a joyful thing to do in the future, and start to think a little bit like that. And we talked a little bit about this in the beginning. I would always recommend people to learn to juggle, you know. But when you're in that space, it's different, you know. There are things that are probably calling your attention that you actually need to do that you haven't been wanting to look at as well, and to take responsibility as well. And I don't know, Jeff, it's a bit hard. There's something wrong about the whole thing, but we can't at the same time fall into victim mode or martyr mode or not worry about it and think it's all okay mode. I think we need to be very realistic, and not realistic, look it in the face somehow. I don't know, what do you think about that?
I think it goes back to when I like to look at the opposite. So when things are complex, I go and do something simple. So when I was in that dark place, I would go to the park with my kids, and my dog and my cat would come along. We would walk the dog and the cat would follow. And we brought a soccer ball and we would just run up and down the field and play. And my oldest was pretty good at soccer. It was me and my youngest trying to get the ball away from him, and the dog would chase us barking. And it was just, those are some of my favorite memories.
Yeah, so I mean, so there's obviously there's an opportunity in these huge crisis moments, right? It's I can't remember what language is it Chinese or Japanese, that the word for crisis literally means opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's not necessarily, we don't need to ignore everything and just think positively, but immediately look for what's the gift in this? What's the gift and opportunity that arises from this terrible situation?
Where have you surprised yourself on this path?
Right. So, well, the first thing that comes to mind is the book on juggling that I wrote, Pearls of Juggling. I think it was the first time that I ever did something that I got lots of other people involved in on a project, and I surprised myself that I was actually able to do it. I raised a crowd fund of like 10,000 euros to make publish in English and in Italian. And before it was even the funds were raised, I was already allocating a lot of the funds for the illustrators, and so it had to work. So it was about finding creative solutions to not just say to people, "Hey, I've got this crowdfunding, donate, please." But that's the same with business general, right? We need to keep coming up with creative solutions to not just say buy my thing, but to tell our tale and make a case for why it's important and why it's actually, you don't have to be living in this suffering state. So that was one place where I surprised myself. I think I have lots of like little surprises all the time, and then when I look back, I'm like, Oh my goodness. I live in like a very rural area. I live in a very rural area in Italy, and and I've learned so much about gardening and growing vegetables and let's say permaculture design process and all of these things have me surprised. And probably if I think back, because my mind's working well on this, the biggest thing that surprised me is when I actually left the UK in 1996. I studied chemistry at university, and I was a shy student. Couldn't really even look at people in the face very comfortably. I started street performing. I think that was probably the biggest thing. This whole trip I went over to this juggling convention in France after my studies with a friend of mine. I hadn't been in an airplane before, and I looked out the window and I was like, whoa, nobody told me it was amazing up there. What else is out there? I told myself, right? And then I was like, I can't come back. There's no way I'm coming back. So I was supposed to come back after 2 weeks, and I came back after 4 months. And just that whole experience just opened my eyes enormously. Before I was on this conveyor belt, it's like school, secondary school, sixth form college, university, and then it would have been like probably a manager's job and all this. But I managed to whip out and craft my own path and already at 21. Um, so yeah, I think that was probably the biggest surprise.
What are you grateful for? Not because it was easy, but because it told something more deeply about you.
Yeah, so I think I've given a lot of my life. I mean, I'm 50 now, so my life's not over, right? But up until now, right?
According
Let's
to my
hope not.
kids, it's over.
Yeah, right. But it isn't over, and this is also an important message to get across, right? It's not over when we're 50. We've got potentially another 20, 30, 40 years ahead of us, right? So we shouldn't be short-sighted about it. Anyway, up until now, I've spent a lot of my time learning. I've been all that time. I've also been teaching, holding retreats, but I've been learning, and I love learning. And I dedicate much more. Um, I dedicate much more time to learning than I think the average people do, let's say. But not just learning from books, going to retreats, really coming to myself. There are some incredible jewels within ourselves that are just there waiting to be found when we take the time to be stiller and not just meditate, but there are some crazy practices out there that are simple as well that just blow our minds about how much more energy we can have in our system when we close up some leakages, let's say. So I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for the part of me that went on that first trip, that had this several very eye-opening experiences and this desire to really dive in deep to find myself. It almost sounds a bit cliche now, I find, as I'm saying it, but then when I was 96, for some reason, I wanted to find a yoga master. I had this thing in my head. I wanted to find a yoga master. And yoga wasn't very popular in 96. There was basically Iyengar and some other masters, but there weren't many. So that particular discipline has been very important to my life, yoga, and it's something I do every day. It's such a part of my life that I don't even really share it much. But to do something like that every day, you need to wake up a curiosity in you. Otherwise, it just becomes mechanical. Mechanical isn't where the joy is at all. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah, I would say I'm grateful also for my family for how they've supported me in my crazy endeavors, let's say. They've never said like, Anthony, you should do this or cut me off or anything. If they see that I'm happy for them, that's their job done, basically.
And that's what we want, right? We want that support from family when we're doing something new. That means the world. So thanks for coming, Anthony. Thanks for sharing this perspective. That was Anthony. He's a man not just teaching play. He's reminding us what it looks like to be alive. And what I took from this conversation is that joy isn't a reward for healing or for doing the hard work. It's part of the path. And I think as men lose contact with play, they lose part of themselves that's still curious and creative and becoming. Play's not childish. It's what kind of breaks the pattern. It wakes us up. And so if something stirred in you during this conversation, follow it. Your life might be waiting on the other side of that play. So thanks for listening, and thanks for being here, Anthony.
Thank you.